Hello and welcome back to Three Things with JR, episode 86, sixth episode of season 3. Thanks for sticking with me, those of you that have listened to all the episodes. I hope you've been enjoying this new season. I've been really enjoying this new season of the podcast, so I hope you are too. I've really been going like deeper down memory lane than I thought I was going to. I didn't plan this, but it's working out that way. I'm talking about periods of my life that I don't really get to or have any reason to talk about all that much anymore. You know, old jobs I've had, the things I learned from those jobs, the fun, the work, the music, the experiences. They are all a part of what makes me me, the who I am today. And I love the idea that these recordings will be available for future generations, my grandkids, their grandkids, long after I'm gone. I hope they enjoy getting to know me a little bit. This particular show is about another one of the jobs I've had. The first job I ever really had. Before Nachman's Bike Shop, before the movie theater, before cheerleader duty, before Crutchfield, before fatherhood. In fact, when I first worked at this job, I wasn't legally old enough to have a job. I hadn't even gone to kindergarten yet. It was custom residential house painting. My dad's a painter. Now, if you've ever hired painters to paint your house, you may understand why painters don't have the best reputation. Many painters are known for showing up late, leaving early, taking longer than expected to get the job done, stealing things, milking customers for more hours, and other unseemly practices. And maybe the paint fumes are to blame, or maybe it's the alcohol, or maybe it's just that it's one of those jobs that can be learned by even the dimmest of laborers. So that's what you get. My dad was none of those things. And customers that were lucky enough to hire him to paint their house found a painter they could trust, that exceeded all of their expectations, showed up early, stayed late, didn't drink, charged fair prices, only hired help that he could trust, and was so good at his job he never really had to even advertise. In fact, he was even written up in Washingtonian magazine as the best painter in Washington, D.C., and as a result, he had all the work he could handle and then some. He was even forced to turn down more work than he could actually do. He didn't even have multiple crews of painters. He was the crew. He had select few workers over the years. He was always there doing most of the work himself, though, and making sure the work his employees did was up to his standards. He was not afraid to climb on rooftops, 40-foot ladders, makeshift scaffolding, very dangerous stuff to make sure the paint got where it needed to go. He would often use a propane torch to burn off old paint while up on a ladder, with nobody there with a fire hose just in case. If you don't know what you're doing when you're burning paint off the wood siding on the side of a house, it wouldn't be hard to set the whole place on fire. He never did that, and it's a good thing that there weren't any catastrophes in his many years of running his own painting company, because he did it all without even having liability insurance. He didn't even go get the proper permits for burning, which I think was a thing you were supposed to do, especially in Washington, D.C. No, he just got the jobs done. My earliest memories of working for my dad were riding in the back of his big blue work truck. I was 3 or 4. I wasn't sitting in a car seat. I was sitting on top of a pile of drop cloths with my own set of little boy painter pants. I went to work with my dad from a pretty early age. We've got pics of me looking just adorable, with paint on my nose, on my arms, and in my hair, using a paint roller to paint a closet. The way I remember it, I painted that closet like a pro, though I'm quite sure my dad went behind me and made sure it was actually done right. Starting when I was about 10 or 11, I started working for my dad on summer vacations, like the entire summer break. I'd get up when my dad woke up, usually around 6 a.m. I'd eat a bowl of cereal, still pretty much half asleep, then ride in the truck to the job, and I would do whatever job I could do. I got pretty good at painting walls, windows, and doors. Actually, doors were my favorite for some reason. I was really good at feathering the glossy trim paint so it looks super smooth, making sure not to leave any paint runs or any missed spots. And the best part was really the painting, the actual painting. So rewarding to see something go from like a dull, lifeless, unwanted color to a vibrant, shiny new color. Like so many things, the payoff of the job, the part that's actually fun and rewarding, is the part you get to do the least of. Because most of painting a house is not painting a house. It's all the prep work that must be done first. Kind of like playing music in a band on stage is the thing you get to do least of when you're a musician. It's all of the rehearsing and prepping and loading in and loading out and recording and all the things you got to do to get to the point where you can stand on a stage and play music for other people. And you only get to do that for an hour or so. It's kind of like that. The actual painting is the fun part. All the other stuff is what makes it possible. The other stuff like removing old paint by sanding, burning, scraping, wire brushing, moving furniture out of the way, laying down drop cloths, covering things with plastic, removing light plate switch and outlet covers, putting tape around fancy light fixtures, cleaning out paintbrushes and roller naps and buckets, carrying all the stuff in from the truck, back out to the truck, shaking out and folding all the drop cloths, loading and unloading the ladders from the top of the van. And actually, as I got bigger, I got really good at lifting a ladder up, like horizontally over my head, balancing it, and then letting it fall towards the side of the van as I heaved it up on top of the van. Sometimes on top of the other ladders that were already on top of the van. I had seen my dad do it with an 8-foot step ladder, but I could do it with a 20-foot, maybe even a 28-foot ladder. I couldn't quite toss the 32 and the 40-foot ladders up there like that, but they were down first anyway. So we would slide them on the from the back of the van and then toss the rest of the ladders on top. I really liked doing that. When my dad painted the windows in a house, he'd always make sure to clean the storm windows. Even though they didn't need painting, they often had to be removed to be able to paint like the entire window frame. So it just made sense to my dad to also clean the glass while the storm window was out. A lot of windows in a lot of these houses would have like 2 storm windows, one for the top, one for the bottom, and then a screen on the outside of that. And we would have to remove all of those to paint windows in a lot of houses. I know for a fact that many painters don't bother to do this, to clean the windows, the storm windows. They're metal framed. They're not part of the contract of what you're supposed to paint. It's not necessary to do a nice paint job, and most would charge extra for window cleaning. But my dad knew that if we put clean storm windows back in after we finished painting the window frames, the customer would look out their window and the combination of the new paint and a crystal clear view of a previously and the combination of the new paint and a crystal clear view out of a previously dirty window would bring a smile to their faces. It was a lot of extra work that I often got stuck doing, but it was worth it. Most of the prep work was tedious, tiresome, boring, and annoying, and it's the main reason I am not a painter today. If it was all painting, I might still be a painter. But the beauty of a paint job well done was not enough to make me want to do any of the rest of the work. So after many summers and almost 2 years after high school, I was done working for my dad, and I've rarely painted anything in the 25 years since. But I look back on those days painting with my dad now, and it brings tears to my eyes. Not because of all the fumes in the paint thinner, but because I learned a lot about who I was then, and it helped me become who I am now. And I got to also spend a lot of time with my dad, and that was great. So here's 3 things about painting houses for my dad in the Eldon M. Stoffel custom residential painting business. Thing 1, never do anything half-assed. I did plenty of things half-assed when working for my dad. I'd be sweeping a floor and I'd miss some spots, sometimes some really big spots, like half of a room. And even though I thought I was done, Dad would always notice when I had not done something very well and always made me go back and do it to completion. Sweep the rest of the floor, scrape all of the paint off that wrought iron railing, fold those drop cloths neatly. Don't do anything half-assed. If you're going to do it right. And it took me a long time with a lot of those reminders from my dad to get to the point where I also took pride in my work and not doing stuff half-assed, even the stuff I don't want to do, like sweeping. I apply this to my day job, my many side gigs, and most everything I do. When I do something, I typically want to be really good at it. I also get a lot of satisfaction when others notice my job well done. Dad didn't only notice when I had done a half-assed job, he also noticed a job well done. He would tell me when I had done a nice job on something, and the more I heard that, the more I wanted to hear that. And it wasn't just about being praised for my work. That was and still is important to me. But it was also about making my dad and his customers happy. I knew if my dad was happy with my work, his customers would be happy with the job. And this feeling, coupled with commensurate pay, made me smile too. It's a big part of what fuels me to do anything. I want to do a job well, I want people to notice, and I want to be paid for that. It's a good thing to get paid for. This is probably why I have done so well in sales and in training, my day job. I get to see the results of my work almost immediately. My day job for many years required me to talk to a lot of people on the phone each day, help them solve their audio and video problems by selling them the best solution. So the payoff was to get the sale after doing a complete job of understanding their needs, wants, and desires. And when I got their credit card number, I knew I had done the job well. And when they would ask to speak to my supervisor to tell them how good I had done, or even if they just told me directly, it was a shot of happiness that made me want that again and again. Now I teach adults to do the same thing, and to see those adults learning all the technical stuff they need to do the job, along with the soft skills needed to connect with their customers, is immensely satisfying. I love seeing light bulbs go off when I've connected with my training class and helped them learn and understand something they didn't previously grasp. It's the thing that makes me want to go to work each day right now. My dad's work ethic was kind of ridiculous. In addition to his long hours, he would work even when he probably should have been home resting, like when he was sick. He wouldn't stay home, not at all. He wouldn't even sleep in a bit. He'd be up early, he'd stay at work late, and he'd remind anybody that asked, if you're going to be sick, might as well make money at the same time. And he took that to extremes. He didn't only work when he was sick, he'd also work when he was physically injured. He tore his rotator cuff at the beach one summer, and when we got back from the beach, he did go get it checked out, and he did go get surgery to repair it a few months later, but he did. And when he did, he put that meant his right arm, his window painting arm, in an immobilizing sling for like 6 weeks. And did he stop working? No, not at all. It was in the summer, so I was able to work with him. I'd move his ladder around for him so he could paint things with his left arm, and he got really good at left-hand painting. Through all of that, he didn't miss more than like 2 days of work, and those were the days he was in the hospital for surgery. Another time, my dad fell off a ladder and broke his pelvis. He wasn't working when that happened. He was at home trimming a branch off a tree the wrong way with a chainsaw and a 20-foot ladder, and he fell off, landed hard, and had to go to the hospital. The next week, I took some time off of my regular job, and now this was after I'd already started my own family and career, but he had a big Georgetown townhouse exterior to paint, so I went back to work for Dad for a week or so. Once again, I'd move his ladder around the townhouse so that he could get on it and go paint stuff. And this time, it wasn't just like a 5-foot step ladder. I would set up a 40-foot ladder on the side of the house, and he'd hobble over to it on his crutches. Remember, his pelvis is broken at this point, and then he would somehow climb up the ladder. Apparently, the broken pelvis didn't prevent climbing a ladder. He was able to make those movements with his legs. Walking was tough. That's why he needed the crutches, but he could climb and descend a ladder. And once he was up there, he'd paint whatever he could reach, then he'd climb down, I'd move the ladder, and he'd do it again. And to this day, I'm the same way. Thank God I'm not painting houses. Thank God my job involves sitting at a computer and talking to people. But I've had many serious injuries over the last 25 years. I've broken my arm. I have a torn ACL, a broken ankle. I've had surgeries, things like that. Multiple car crashes with broken bones and such. And I've certainly been sick plenty of times. But the last thing I want to do is to burn up my PTO for this stuff. If Dad didn't work, he didn't get paid. If I don't work, I have to use my vacation time for something other than a vacation, and that never sat well with me. So if possible, I'd work instead of staying home to recuperate, just like Dad would have done. There is no doing my job half-assed, and I learned that the hard way, by painting houses with the best house painter in Washington, D.C., injured or not. We'll take a short break and be back for things 2 and 3 right after this.
Nothing I can say. Change your mind and stay. So I'll see you later today.
Thing 2, the radio. By far, the best thing about painting houses was listening to the radio every day. Dad had many portable radios over the years. Many would last a long time, despite how covered in paint they all were. Those radios were barely recognizable as radios at all, like after just a few weeks on the job. And the amount of dust that must have gathered on and inside of those portable radios, it's amazing they lasted longer than a few months. But they did. Years sometimes. And the radio was always on, and it was usually on an oldies station because Dad loved the music of his childhood, and you know what? So did I. I mean, who can listen to Buddy Holly or the Big Bopper or Elvis, those early Beatles songs, and not just feel good? I heard those songs so many times I learned all the words and would sing along while sanding, scraping, cleaning, and painting. The radio DJs also made it special. The way they would talk up the songs, take requests, 2 for Tuesdays. Even the commercials were fun. I just loved the concept of being a DJ, playing music in a studio. That sounded like a job for me. It wasn't always music. I have always been a fan of talk radio as well, and we listened to plenty of that. There were plenty of days in the late 80s, early 90s that the radio was not playing oldies when I was at work with Dad. When I was in high school, 106.7 WJFK was my go-to radio station choice for summer days painting with my dad. WJFK was all talk, starting with Howard Stern in the morning, G. Gordon Liddy, middle of the day, and Don and Mike in the afternoon. Now, Dad hated Howard Stern. He still does. But sometimes he'd tolerate him while we worked, or he'd go work in a different part of the house where he couldn't hear Howard Stern. But my dad did love G. Gordon Liddy and right-wing nut jobs like Rush Limbaugh, stuff like that. And then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would both enjoy listening to Don and Mike, the afternoon DJs. And they weren't just playing music. These were a pair of fat white Catholic guys. That was one of their taglines. And they would do impressions and make jokes and take calls and play games. And they were like awesome. I knew that if I ever got the chance to work in radio, I wanted to have a show like Don and Mike. I envisioned myself sitting in a radio studio with a friend, talking about our lives, taking calls from listeners, playing those stupid radio games, maybe playing some songs that I liked and wanted to play, and getting paid for it. I still want to do that. If I could get a job doing that today that paid me at least what I make right now, I would do it. But therein lies the rub. I knew that Howard Stern, Don and Mike had been doing it for years, and they drew such an audience. Howard still does, and they actually earned their respective 6-figure, 7-figure paychecks. I certainly thought I could get to that point if given the opportunity, and I tried. I was a part-time DJ at a radio station here in Charlottesville 25 years ago, and I'm going to talk a lot about that on a future episode. That's a story for another podcast. Of course, speaking of podcasts, that's sort of my outlet for this right now. I do this podcast, and it's a lot of what I wanted to do on the radio. I get to say basically whatever I want. Sometimes I talk with friends on the show. That's been fun, but it's not quite live radio. I mean, I can edit out the dead air. I get do-overs when I say something stupid or flub a line. It's not like being live and on the air. Also, I can't really just play whatever songs I want whenever I want. It's nice to be able to say anything I want and to put it out there and refine my craft and try to create something that's entertaining. that hopefully brings a smile to your face. I really hope there's people out there listening to this while they work at their job, and it makes their workday go by faster and with more joy. That's what I'm hopefully doing for you right now. But I would really love to do it live and on the air. And if radio was not in the horrible place it's in right now, I mean, terrestrial local radio stations suck. Satellite radio is about as good as it gets. And, I mean, the chances of actually doing this job there at Sirius XM would be they're pretty astronomically low. So I'm going to keep doing this because I love it. If I had to paint houses in silence, I probably wouldn't have lasted one summer. Like, I can't think about my time painting for my dad without also thinking about listening to the radio. I think about the songs, about the times Howard Stern would say something so horrible. While my dad was in the room, he'd be very worried about his customers actually hearing it and how he would make me turn it off or turn it down. Or if I wanted to listen to Howard, I'd have to put headphones on so he could listen to the oldies or some other radio station, and or I wouldn't get to listen to Howard at all. So I hope you have something to listen to that gets you through your work day with a smile on your face. Thing number 3. Damn, we painted some nice houses. My dad worked for some of the richest people in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and all of their friends. He worked for the rich people and their friends because his customer base was all word of mouth. There's several customers, houses, and jobs that stand out as quite special. I'd like to tell you about them. First off, the Gordons. These people were quite rich. They sold their house in Georgetown for $3 million to buy a bigger, nicer house in Maryland, just inside the Beltway. He was a doctor, a really good one, apparently. The house they sold, if I remember correctly, served as the summer White House for some former president. I'm not sure which one. My dad painted that house and the new house they bought, and it was quite large. And, of course, the whole thing needed to be painted. It wasn't exactly a fixer-upper or anything. It's just that things were the wrong color, or the paint was a little faded, so they called my dad. In fact, my dad worked for the Gordons for many years. 3 different houses that I remember that I know he painted. And he got a lot of work from friends of the Gordons because of that word-of-mouth advertising. That big house in Maryland, that's one of the houses we painted where I can picture the entire house, every room of the house. And if I was ever that rich, it would be that kind of house I would buy. It wasn't tall. There wasn't a lot of stairs in the house. It was long and wide and very wide hallways. There was an atrium surrounded by glass in the middle of the house with plants and stuff in it. A living room the size of a basketball court, bathrooms everywhere, a kitchen fit for a 5-star restaurant, many very large bedrooms, and the pool house. The pool house was amazing. It was an indoor pool with windows all around it, slate floors, and a huge skylight above the pool. There was a sitting area, a full bar, and a TV area off to the side. This was such a nice indoor pool area. And because of how many windows and sunroofs there were, it was like an indoor pool you could actually get a suntan in. Or you could watch TV, or you could go play Marco Polo and do all of the above. And that skylight was so big. It had cross beams underneath it that you could actually stand on to paint the trim around the big skyward facing windows, which was helpful because they needed to be painted. To get into the skylight, there was a door on the roof, and Dad set up ladders across the sunbeams so that we could walk across them. And after we would go in there and walk across the ladders and walk, we were like 30 feet above the pool, and we would, prep all the surfaces and paint them. My dad also painted Wonder Woman's house. Not Gal Gadot, the current Wonder Woman. No, Linda Carter. The Miss World USA 1975 beauty that played Wonder Woman on TV from 1975 to 1979. He painted her house many years later, but I wasn't with him on that job. I just heard about it. My dad also worked for a CNN talking head. She's still a fixture on CNN and has been for many years now. We painted her house in D.C. many times, and she was a big fan of my dad, and my dad loved working for her. They were almost like friends. It was the closest thing possible to the TV show Murphy Brown. If you remember that show from the 1980s, it featured Candice Bergen as a news lady in D.C. with a live-in house painter named Eldon. I mean, how was it not inspired by Eldon M. Stoffel Custom Residential Painting? I mean, he didn't live with her, but still, almost every other way, that show was kind of after my dad and the CNN lady. Now, that lady, she was fun to work for. She had a great house. She was a great customer, but she was not always a nice person. And we know this because of the way she talked to her elderly mother. We were there one day talking to her about what she wanted painted this time. We had just gotten there, and she was getting ready to leave for work, explaining to my dad what she wanted painted, when her visiting mother came out on the back porch with us. And this lady was extremely rude and impatient with her sweet old mother. And Dad and I were both disgusted by that. Now, it didn't totally ruin the relationship, but it definitely helped us see her in a new light. Many years later, though, I once again went to work for my dad, despite having not painted for him in years, because that CNN lady hired him to paint her New York City condo on 59th Street overlooking Central Park, 2 doors down from the Plaza Hotel. It was a big 2.5-week job. We had to paint the entire inside of a large apartment, spacious bedrooms, many bathrooms, big kitchen, big living room, a nice view of Central Park. It was awesome. And I brought my wife and my daughter with me, and my Angela, Allison, myself, and my dad. We all lived in the apartment the entire time while we painted the entire apartment. Now, Dad would do anything for his customers, even stuff that wasn't painting. So when she asked him to replace one of the toilets in this New York City apartment, he said sure. He'd done things like that for her over the years, but doing things like that in D.C. is different than doing stuff like this in New York City. So my job was to go to the Home Depot and buy a toilet and bring it back to the apartment. So I did. When I came back from Home Depot with the toilet in a huge box on a hand truck, the building manager saw me coming in, and he was none too happy with us. He told me in no uncertain terms that we were lucky he was even allowing us to paint, even though we were out-of-towners and were not part of the New York City Painters Union. He was going to get in trouble, potentially, for allowing us to do painting there. Because if you're not part of the Painters Union, you don't paint in New York City, apparently. And painting was bad enough, but he was next level mad when he found out our customer had asked us to replace the toilet. He said, that's not how it works. What if you guys break a pipe or something? Are you prepared to deal with all the damage that might do to all the condos below? I didn't know what to say. My dad was up in the apartment. I was just down there street level with the building manager trying to bring a toilet in. I just told him the customer asked us to do it, and my dad's done it for her before at her house in D.C., so we told him we could do it. And the building guy reluctantly let me in with the toilet and told me from that day forward, painting, nothing else. And that's what we did. And luckily, we were successful. Dad was successful in replacing the toilet without ruining anybody's condos below. Another one of my dad's customers had a couple of houses on the island of Nantucket. And once again, I took some time off from my day job to join him to live on Nantucket for a week and paint a really, really nice house. It wasn't the summer season, but so when we were there, it was kind of cold and windy. Still, though, it was awesome. We took the customer's Jeep out on the beach, drove all around the island when we weren't painting, and I made enough money off of that job to go spend a couple days in New York City before heading back to reality. If my dad had been your typical painter, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been so successful. We wouldn't have had all that wonderful time together. I wouldn't have learned to be who I actually am today. I'd be a different person. Instead of quitting painting and going straight into retirement, my dad spent a year or so down in Mississippi helping people build and paint houses that replaced ones destroyed by Katrina. He wasn't working for celebrities or the mega-rich people. He was working for nothing with his church, helping people that needed help. I really wanted to go help him with this job too, but it just wasn't in the cards for me to take a trip to the Deep South with my family and my job at the time. I kind of wish I had. Despite the oppressive heat and working conditions, it would have been quite a rewarding chapter in this story. My dad just turned 73. He is now retired, living in Emmitsburg, Iowa, and if the need arises, he will still get out his painting stuff and go paint an apartment or a house or whatever is needed.
People who love should always love people. People who care put their souls on the line. People of faith have something to live for. Just wasting their lives.
One last thing before I let you go. There's one job that stands out as both the best couple of days of work and the worst, all at the same time. It was August, hot as hell, and we were painting the exterior of a large brick white house. The house had these deep brick wells around the basement windows. There was probably 10 or 12 of them around the house, some of them large enough for one person to climb down into, others larger than that, large enough for like 3 or 4 people. And they were deep. Once you were down in them, the bricks were taller than we were. And before we could paint the white bricks in these window wells, we had to clean them. They were covered in dirt and green algae stuff. And pressure washers weren't really a thing at that time, so we couldn't just stand up on ground level and wave a magic pressure washing wand down in there and clean all the green stuff off. So we did it the old-fashioned way. We got down in those window wells with 5-gallon buckets full of bleach water and a couple of scrub brushes, and a couple of scrub brushes and a hose. And we scrubbed all the green shit off those bricks in all of those window wells. And we did this on the hottest days of August. I don't ever remember being hotter and sweatier or working harder than I did those 2 days. I did most of the window wells. My dad was probably off burning paint off of the siding while he was up on a ladder. He did some of the window wells too, and we both remember those 2 days because of how miserable we were and how good we felt at the same time. We had the radio blaring. We had water and Gatorade. We had water and Gatorade. We had the sun to dry us off, and we were done. We had the cleanest window wells in all of Virginia, ready for a fresh coat of white paint. And we were happy. We had the radio playing music all day, something we could both enjoy, and we loved it. See you next week.
Everybody say, people